Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first edition of the Buzz Live, BeeWare's monthly community call. This is the time when the core team and the community come together to discuss everything BeeWare. For those who haven't seen BeeWare before, it's a collection of tools and libraries for writing cross-platform GUI applications in Python, including desktop applications for macOS, Windows, and Linux, mobile applications for Android and iOS, and single-page web apps. As a quick overview, we'll begin with core team introductions, followed by State of the Hive and where we need help. After that, it's Waggle Dance time, followed by Down the Bee Burrow. We'd like to acknowledge that many of us on this call today are speaking from the lands of First Nations. We'd like to recognize the continuing connection of the people of those First Nations to their lands, waters, and culture, and pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Kattni, and I'm speaking from the lands of the Bodéwadmi, also known as Southeast Michigan, US. My involvement in BeeWare is mostly around developer relations. I focus primarily on building up the documentation and improving the experience for those who find the project. Now I'll let each of the folks on the core team introduce themselves. Russell? You're muted.
There we go. It's a great start. Is this thing on? Hi, I'm Russell Keith-Magee. I am speaking from Whadjuk, Noongar, boodja, otherwise known as Perth, Western Australia. I am the founder of the BeeWare project, and I work on it full time now in an open source capacity. My interests are wide and varied, as that may indicate. In addition to working on the BeeWare project, I'm also a member of the CPython core team, and I am an emeritus member of the Django core team.
All right, thanks. Russell Martin?
Hello, everyone. My name is Russell Martin. I work as a software developer for a security for AI company called Hidden Layer. I stumbled across BeeWare probably 4 years ago now in the depths of COVID, and was able to start making contributions with Russell, and he's such a great growler. I decided to stick around for quite a while, so I was able to make quite a few contributions into Briefcase and Toga and kind of beef up the CI and so forth, but been a happy part of the team since.
Thanks. All right, next up, Philip.
Hello, my name is Philip, or Fildini. If you see me across the internet, it's probably Fildini. I work as an engineering manager for an AI scribe company based in San Francisco, and I'm coming to you from the traditional lands of the various tribes of the Ohlone people, also known as the East Bay area of California.
All right, thanks. And finally, Charles.
Hello there. My name's Charles. I'm on Piscataway and Susquehannock land, also known as Baltimore, Maryland, over here. And I don't know. I'm a welder and carpenter that for some reason people trust to let me put code in stuff. But I happened upon BeeWare not that long ago, a couple years ago now, and it's pretty much exactly what I had been looking for years earlier for something, and so I jumped in and started trying to fix and improve things, and I've been here ever since.
Excellent. Thank you. We'd also like to recognize BeeWare's financial sponsors, our gold sponsor Anaconda, and our individual financial members. If you'd like to support the work of the BeeWare project, please visit beeware.org/membership. Next up is State of the Hive. This is your monthly BeeWare by the numbers update. Overall, across the entire BeeWare project, we merged 463 PRs from 47 authors. This month, there's been a lot of activity because of PyCon US. We'd like to recognize this month's contributors. Take it away, Russell.
Yes, so this month we have seen contributions from Abdo, Abdur-Rahmaan, Janhangeer, AJTheDataGuy, albertchae, Aman, Sachan, Aniruddha Nalawade, Aqil Aziz, atuseract, Audrey Dang, Campbell, Changquan Yu, Andy Fundinger, Drew RB, Chris Paddy, Grant Wang, Michael Wilson, Ian Dolge, Joel Peter, John, Jorge Linhua Sinhun, Matthew Weigel, Miro, Luis Palacios, John Kim, Matt Van Horn, Nando301, Oliver Lee, Taiwo Ozurinde, Punik Dixit, Robert J. Spencer, Rolando13, Shannon, Sky, Daryl Wang, Tyler Batwell, Vinicius Cubiano Ferreira, and David C. Thank you all very much to everyone who has contributed over the last month.
Yes, we only see this level of contribution during the sprints of major conferences, and we're really excited to have everybody. The two primary projects in the BeeWare suite are Briefcase and Toga. This month on Briefcase, we merged 38 PRs from 13 authors. Russell, if you'd like to talk about Briefcase's notable new features.
So yeah, all features are important, but there's a couple that I wanted to point out as being particularly interesting or useful. The first is we've had some improved validation of project details in a pair of pull requests, 2840 and 2870. This is essentially taking a BeeWare project and making sure that you don't configure it in a way that's going to prevent you from being able to complete being able to build an application at the end of the day. 2840 is looking at an edge case where Python packages will allow characters that Python modules are not allowed to have. So the classic example is a full stop. You can actually upload a package to PyPI called foo.bar. It's a completely legal thing that you to pip install, but it's obviously because of the dot, not a legal Python module name. And so now we're validating that correctly against the app name of a project must actually be a valid Python module name. 2870 is then not looking at the app name, looking at where you're actually building the project in the first place. You can have characters, your directory in which you create your BeeWare project might contain a space or a comma or, for some reason, a Unicode left to right marker, which are all legal characters in paths, but various tools have issues. Most notably, the Android toolchain on Windows has issues with spaces and some Unicode characters. So we now validate that out and say, at least give you a warning if we think it might be a problem, or actually raise an error if we know it's going to be a problem if any of those characters are present. We've also seen a bunch of improvements to the MSI installers in Briefcase. It's been an area of focus recently, trying to add new features in there. You can now have customized branding on an MSI installer. The directory selection page, you can now see, okay, here's how much disk space have I got, how much space am I going to need to install this package, and that's present. And there's better control over the post-install scripts and pre-uninstall scripts so that you can run them in a headless mode and know that you're running them in a headless mode by various variables that are being exposed to those scripts when they run.
Excellent, thank you. And this month on Toga, we merged 62 PRs from 11 authors. And Russ, can you talk about Toga's new features?
Okay, again, every PR is important. A couple that I wanted to note out. One is that we've seen a couple of improvements to Android web views, both managing the background color and also static content handling. There's a weird edge case in Android's web view where if you say, show me this block of HTML, it will do that happily, unless the HTML contains a hash character, in which case the entire page won't render for reasons. So we've now fixed that, and so it can actually now render Android web or render static content that contains a hash character and other characters that might be problematic. The other is a very a change that nobody will really notice because it's entirely behind the scenes, but it was essential for getting Python 3.15 support. When async support was added to Python in the 3.5 timeframe, there was a very complex set of behind the scenes APIs for how you get an event loop in the first place, called an event loop policy. Over time, that event loop policy architecture has proven to just be more complicated than it's worth. And so over the course of the last couple of releases, Python as a language has been deprecating the use of the async IO event loop policy until in 3.15 it's actually being removed. And so it kind of got thrown on us at the last minute, but with a downstream dependency removed support for it, which meant we had to remove support for it. But we have now removed the last usage of event loop policy in Toga's codebase. So we are now ready for a 3.15 release in Toga. We're not currently running CI on 3.15, but we will at some point in the very near future.
Excellent, thank you. Charles, if you'd like to tell us about the Canvas updates.
Hey, so yeah, another thing going on in Toga, we have a Canvas widget, which is a canvas onto which you can draw various vector shapes and text and even paste images now. And it's based on the canvas in HTML5 that you control via JavaScript. And our goal is for the API to mimic that JavaScript API as much as possible with some translations just to fit into Python. And I kind of came across it recently. I mean, we already had the widget, but I noticed that there were a number of ways in which it could sync up better and could work a little better and make a little more sense. And so it's been a lot of different PRs and a lot of different small changes. If you are curious, 3994 is the issue that kind of holds the master list. But basically, we've done a big reorganization and revamp of both internally how the canvas does its thing, and also what the API is like for someone writing programming to make it do stuff. And hopefully, we've done our best to make everything backwards compatible. If you have existing code using Canvas and you update to Toga 0.8.4 or newer, that hopefully everything should work. You'll just get deprecation warnings. And we have a page in the docs with tips and advice on how to update and what to do differently. If you do notice anything that breaks when you update, let us know and we can try and fix that.
Thank you. All right, this month across the rest of the BeeWare project, we merged 363 PRs from 32 authors. There have been some major updates to the rest of the project as well. In terms of GitHub, we have a new triage process. What we were finding is that issues would be filed and we would have a lengthy discussion on what needs to be done. And that means that what exactly needs to be done is actually 43 comments into a GitHub issue. And so what we're now doing is creating a sub-issue on an issue once the decision has been made. And that sub-issue, the first comment will contain exactly what needs to be done. So anybody coming to the issue would be able to say, okay, hey, done, I know exactly what I need to do. Along with that, we're using GitHub projects as the issue tracker. And what this is allowing us to do is create categories such as InDesign or needs design. And that allows us to have those discussions. And then we have a ready category, and the issues that go into that ready category are the issues that have exactly what needs to be done in that first comment. It also allows us to categorize them by sort of size and complexity, because we have labels like good first issue, but is it a good first issue for someone who understands GitHub, or is it a good first issue for someone who's never used Git before? That will be able to sort of explain the categories of size and complexity. Will be able to explain like what the level of the issue actually is in much more granular terms. In terms of our contribution guide, I fixed an issue with a per project customization of instructions problem. The issue was that we have a single contribution guide. It is spread out across all sets of documentation, and it's all from a single source. And that way we can only write it once and we don't have to keep updating it. So what happened is there's two sections, a what and a how. And the how is everything on how to do things, and the what is what you can do. And in each what, there is a list of collapsed content at the bottom that is the how to do that particular thing. So submit an issue would have how create an issue. The problem was you are able to customize that information for each repository. Toga, for example, has a very specific way to install everything. And so the how page is of set up a dev environment, for example, it has customized for Toga. The problem is that it was showing up in the help or in the how section, but when you looked at it in the collapsed section, those customizations weren't there. And that's because it was actually referencing the canonical copy of the guide, not the local copy with the customizations in it. And so after some changes, it now is actually referencing the local copy, which means all those customizations show up in the collapsed content as well. And Russell, if you'd like to cover CPython and CI build wheel.
Sure. Over the last couple of weeks, I have been spending a lot of time with the gift that just keeps giving, otherwise known as macOS 26. macOS 26 introduced a bunch of changes to the way logs are handled. It's been the sort of the long, again, much like the Python removing the event loop, the event loop factor policies. macOS has been changing the way logging has worked away from the NS log system onto this new OS log system. And in macOS 26, that's kind of effectively been finalized, but the net impact of that is that all of the logs that were being reported by BeeWare apps running on macOS 26 were coming through in the log as private messages. And so we've had to do a bunch of work to get the CPython to log things in a way so that they won't show up as being private messages. And where hopefully today I should actually be able to get the last pieces of that in place so that we now actually will be able to see macOS 26 logs, or logs of on macOS 26 logs of briefcase apps. We've also seen some changes in CI build wheel. The 3.15 beta 1 release was the first official CPython release that included an official iOS download. And so CI build wheel had to be adapted to use that new package. And there's also some very, very subtle changes between what was in the unofficial BeeWare support package that has been used for the last couple of years in CI build wheel, and what the official actual published as it got accepted by CPython. And so some of those adaptations need to get into place. Those are now out. CI build wheel 4 is out, and so you can now build CPython 3.15 binary wheels for iOS. There's also CI build wheel 4 also includes some changes to support building NumPy and some other numerical Python packages on Android, contributed by Malcolm Smith, who's my co-worker at Anaconda. The numerical Python ecosystem has a lot of weird edge cases and things that need to be done in order to build binary packages. It is the very, very model of weird rabbit holes on how things get compiled, and so getting those things to compile correctly on iOS and Android is sometimes a bit of a headache. We've now got some much better tooling in place to support building those packages.
Excellent. And that's the state of the Hive. Next up, where we need help. We are always looking for people to contribute to BeeWare, but sometimes it's hard to know where the help is needed most. This month, we're looking for help on continuous integration instabilities, and our issue of the month this month is on Briefcase. Russell, if you'd like to elaborate.
Sure. So those of you who have been around the BeeWare project will know that we have a CI system, and on the core projects, on Toga and Briefcase, we have 100% branch coverage, and that's essentially how we make sure that we don't end up with regressions. We make sure that the code works and continues to work. That CI system involves not just running the test suite, but running it on lots of different operating systems, and running it on lots of different Python versions and lots of different CPU architectures, and so on and so on. We end up with like 50 or 60 tests running for Briefcase, or suites of tests running for Briefcase and Toga when we run those tests. And for the most case, they work fine. They're there, they're reliable. But of late, we have had 3 areas where we've been seeing CI instabilities. Not that the tests are breaking, but that they're breaking inconsistently. OpenSUSE seems to have an interesting problem with their repositories, where every now and then the repositories just stop working and we can't even build a test image to work on them. Windows on ARM, when we run test processes under Windows on an ARM64 machine, there is again, once in 5 runs, the process just doesn't start. It returns error code 1. That's all the error message we get. We don't know why. You rerun the test, and usually it works the second time around. If it doesn't work the second time, it works the third time. But we'd like to not have to keep mashing the rerun button. And similarly, PySide 6 on Ubuntu seems to be giving us some problems, mostly again on ARM64, but we are also seeing the failures on x86-64. Essentially, we'd like this to stop happening, either by working out what the actual cause of the problem is, like that would be the best possible solution, find out what the problem is and fix it, but worst case, even just a retry strategy, so that if the test fails, it will try again 2 or 3 times until it actually works. That's less than ideal, but at least we know that it's an intermittent problem, and a problem that is quite possibly a function of the fact that it's running in a weird CI environment. So yeah, any help on those would be very much appreciated. The bigger issue that I wanted to flag, there are lots of big projects that we'd like people to take on. One of the bigger projects that's kind of lurking in the background and has been there for a while is Briefcase 2706, adding a plugin interface for packaging formats. When you dig into the internals of Briefcase, it sits there and it provides support for macOS and Linux and Windows and Android and iOS and all these different platforms. And it might seem like they're all baked in, and they are, but they're actually all built against a plugin interface. So that as a third party, if you wanted to build a Briefcase extension for Commodore 64, you could do that. I'm going to question your life choices, but you could absolutely do that. because the plugin interface exists for you to build a briefcase backend that supports another architecture or that supports a different packaging format. The one exception to that is packaging format, is the actual packaging formats themselves. So when you package for Windows, you can choose to build an MSI installer or a zip installer. When you build something for macOS, you can choose to build a PKG or a DMG or a .app bundle. These are there and they're hard coded. So when you build a macOS app, you have 3 options, and those are the only 3 options you have. They're about the only 3 options you really want to have on macOS, but on Windows, there's at least 2 that we're missing. We don't have an NSys installer and we don't have an MSIX installer. The NSys installer, we're unlikely to ever add ourselves. The MSIX installer, we probably need to get one on there fairly soon because all the advice we're getting from Microsoft is that's the one that they'd like you to be using. But if when we do that, we'd rather be doing it as a plugin. So, hey, here's another MSIX installer, because we're unlikely to build an NSys installer. But if there's community interest, we want the community to be able to build that. So the task that we have is to take the code that we already have, no changes to the actual functionality of the code, but restructure it so that all of our support for MSIs and DMGs and PKGs and so on is behind a plugin interface, so that a third party could build a MSI or NSys or any other format for any other architecture could be built, could be plugged in, and then extended so that capability exists in the Briefcase ecosystem without necessarily being part of Briefcase. This is actually just part of a broader thing that's in Briefcase and Toga generally, is that, and something I've inherited from my time in Django, is that adding a feature doesn't need to be in the core in order to be a good feature. If we can make the framework have the ability for other people to plug things into it, it takes the maintenance burden off of us and puts it onto other people. And so anything we can do, we may be slightly resistant to adding a new feature to Toga or to Briefcase, but if we can add a new plugin interface that lets other people build things that fits into Toga or Briefcase, we'll be a lot more enthusiastic about that.
Thank you. So if you're interested in contributing, you can find all of the issues that are ready to be picked up at beeware.org/BEE/ready. And that's where we need help. Next up, it's waggle dance time. When worker bees find a good source of pollen and return to the hive, they do a waggle dance to tell the rest of the bees where to find the good stuff. So here's the BeeWare community waggle dance, all the cool stuff that's been happening in the BeeWare community. I'll start and then I'll go through the list as shown in the notes. When I call your name, unmute your mic and provide your update. So first up, I have been migrating Podium documentation. Podium is a slide deck software using BeeWare. And the documentation is currently in Sphinx, and it is one of 2 repositories we have left that are documented that are using Sphinx. Everything else is running make docs. So when I dug into, it was recently when we had to update something, Sphinx failed, and I decided we were done with it. So dug into that, found out Podium basically didn't have documentation. So I'm also writing documentation for Podium, which has been an interesting learning experience because I've never worked with Podium. So the other repository is Toga Chart, and that is also on my radar to move to make docs. Both of them will be, yes, I was working with the Podium doc. Both of those will be brought up to make docs, and then everything we've got that's documented will be on make docs and using Markdown, which is excellent. That's totally my goal in the first place. And that's what I've been working on recently. Next up is Russell.
So harking back to my the status update from before, I've been doing a lot of work on macOS 26 support recently. There are still a lot of little issues that need to be resolved, in particular iOS layout. There's a couple of open tickets from John, who's on this call, that I need to get onto reviewing. The other area I've been spending a lot of work is on extending Briefcase to use other environments, to use other environment management tools. At the moment, everything that Briefcase is working on it assumes the existence of an official CPython interpreter and the usage of pip to actually the VM standard library module to build a virtual environment, and then the pip to install the dependencies into that environment. Again, looking at plugin interfaces or the ability to extend things into other ecosystems, we are interested in being able to do things like support UV to build the environment, to build your environment, or potentially in the longer term being able to use Conda as well. So being able to use a Conda ecosystem and Conda packages to be able to build your BeeWare application. So there's an ongoing project that I've been tinkering with. The code is large and complicated, and hopefully in the near future, we'll be able to use at least UV and potentially Conda in Briefcase.
All right. Next up is Charles.
Hey, so I will also harken back what I mentioned earlier, the Canvas revamp. I haven't actually done very much on it just this past month. I've had other things going on. I hope to be getting back to it in the coming month. But yeah, doing a lot of reorganizing and restructuring of like the class hierarchy for the for what the Canvas uses internally to represent its various drawing actions, and trying to I've changed the signature of some methods, changed around what parameters they take and which ones are keyword only to try and match the JavaScript version better. And you know, I had been inactive for a little while, and I rushed back in to get enough of it done for the latest Toga release, so that it would be not in a too much of a transitional state. But yeah, there's still things left to do. I've still got a couple of methods to change over, and then from there it'll be continuing to add in more functionality that is in the HTML canvas that we don't have. And Corin isn't here on this call with us, but he's also been instrumental in a lot of that canvas work. So shout out to him too.
Excellent. Next is John.
Hi, so it's summer for me, so over the past month or so, I've been working on a lot of miscellaneous like fixes and I guess fixed features for Toga. So there's 4431, which is the so you know how WinForms buttons like the interior of it, like it looks like hollow and transparent, and I managed to fix that. There's 4434, which is like when you resize the web view and on high DPI screen, it's just like lots of black lines. And then I've been working on detail list actions and like rendering changes in Cocoa, and also adapting iOS's scroll views to liquid glass. I know you. And there's some more work I've been doing. Hold on, let me disable push to talk because. Sorry. There's some other work I've been doing, like the scaffold layer in Toga. Basically, while investigating some issues with like option container and like the effect when you scroll a scroll view into the system into bars, like the navigation bar or the tab bar on iOS, like it kind of blurs and becomes a different color. Somehow that wasn't really happening with the current option container setup, even when I hacked into some Toga interiors. And turns out the fact that our option container layout works at all on iOS is kind of a coincidence. So we came up with some refactors for that, but most importantly, we came up with a rush. By the way, that's Chrysler Rush. Rush of Keith-Magee. So sorry. So we came up with a way to abstract ways to describe like what he calls big picture navigation issues, like sidebar or like the bottom tab bars on iOS, rather than say you can just put a option container in a tiny corner of the window. So yeah, and as a bonus, we're also going to add depth navigation as part of this process, which means that for example, the Messages app, you have a list of like texts from your friends, and then you can click on one of them, and then a new view gets pushed in. Type of stuff that's been long requested in like 785, I think. So I think it's really gonna push Toga forward because some long requested features, and it's like a whole new world, really. So the tickets are 4059, which is the initial really wordy and bad discussion I raised. There's 4271, which was the proposal by Russ, and 4298 to 4305 are the actual tickets, the actual work items that are to be implemented. And I'm already working on 4298 on 4382. I already have the core portion done, even though 4382 itself is not going to add anything new. And then in the meantime, I've also been just kind of field testing Toga to build simple apps. This was more than 1 month ago, but I made John ZHOU 721 / make number. It's basically like a, I don't know if y'all have heard of the show Number Sense. It's basically like a game. It's like a really simple game, but it shows how I can quickly, you know, under like 3 days, make a functional GUI with Toga without all the fluff or customization that I need to do. And then there's John Joe 721 / Sudoku solver, which I just finished like 2 days ago. It took me a total of 3 hours using pre-existing code that solves the Sudoku with Python SAT to, sorry, not the exam SAT, to build a functional GUI. So what I really like about Toga is how it makes it really easy to make functional GUIs really quickly, even though it might look like, you know, not really customized. But that's okay because not all apps need to be customized. And sometimes I need to know some things about Toga internals to get more advanced functionality. But Briefcase, on the other hand, is already working quite well. All the interesting bits are very well documented. So Briefcase was, I think, pretty much production ready once we get the rough edges, you know, cornered, like smoothed out. Sorry.
All good. Thanks very much. Next up is Luis.
I'm currently working on a briefcase issue that basically when you're going through the setup wizard for an app and you want to create an Android emulator, it offers you a selection of API levels and system images that you can choose from instead of just kind of defaulting to like a single emulator. So I'm just kind of working through that and trying to align tests. That's pretty much it for me.
Excellent. Thanks
I'll
so
just
much.
jump in on that one. I'm really excited by this one because the functionality is there. Like you can create a briefcase, or sorry, a briefcase test, Android test image with any SDK or any API level. Like you can do it, but you've got to know the obscure syntax. And every time I need to do it, I've got to go remember what the obscure syntax is. So. But there are regular occasions where someone comes up and says, "Oh, I'm running this on Android 33 and the behavior is different." It's like, oh god, now I've got to go remember how to do the damn thing. So having this as just the menu option comes up, I am really excited for this one. So
excellent. All right, and that's Waggle Dance time. And last but not least, it's down the bee burrow. Rabbits aren't the only animals that burrow. Some bees do as well. It's time to dig deeper into topics that have got the hive a-buzzing. We have one topic today from John. Go ahead, John.
So hi, I just posted a bunch of screenshots in the. Oh, I thought it comes from Jesse. That's. Sorry, yeah, I'm from North America, Texas specifically. Anyways, I just posted a bunch of screenshots in the chat, and you can see that these are kind of non-standard components in each OS. For example, when you long press on a message in the Messages app on iOS, you get this like. By the way, the credits for this image goes to Charles. I found it on a random issue ticket. When you see it, there's like more popping up things than just a menu. Even though the other platforms like Windows, Mac OS, or Linux, when you right press, it's pretty much just a menu, you know. And then on the second image is the sidebar for the Mac OS's native reminders app. So we can see how, like, for example, the specs for is this specs for specifications, or is just or how do I pronounce SB? Never mind. I'll just say specifications. For example, the specifications of Material 3 say that a navigation drawer, which is like basically the Android equivalent of a sidebar, only contains sections and specific destinations for the app. But we can see how macOS, this reminder app, like can put like arbitrary widgets and even toolbar items in the sidebar. And then there's Windows. Sorry for the old screenshot, but it kind of works the same nowadays. Is that Word has like a ribbon, even though no other platform has such absurd ways of representing commands. So my question is, Toga needs to remain an abstraction framework. So three of these cases, it's obviously not feasible to try to cover all the little like edges of the platform. On the other hand, these three like use cases are all kind of like significant, and like it feels like an app would just look a bit boring if there's not like these types of things. So what's BeeWare's philosophy towards solving these issues? Like if there's something highly platform specific, like what's our stance towards implementing it, or like trying to allow these use cases, if at all we want to do so?
Russell, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so I guess this is the sort of the existential question for any cross-platform GUI framework. The core thing from my perspective is that all abstractions leak. It is impossible to have a true cross-platform anything, single API across multiple platforms that can do all things for all people. So the question then becomes, how do you represent that? And Toga tries to tackle this in a couple of different ways. The first one is in terms of the API it exposes, we try to capture use cases rather than specific manifestations. So a good example of this is like the way menus and commands handle. And this actually does play a little bit into the thing you were talking about, the Windows ribbon bar. There is no explicit when you have an application needs to have a quit menu or quit item in its menu. Where does that menu appear? Well, in the case of a macOS app, it needs to be under the application menu, and it needs to be the last item, and it needs to be called quit. But on Windows, it needs to be under the file menu, and it needs to be called exit, and so on. Toga explicitly does not have the ability to build menus. It has the ability to build commands, and those commands then manifest in various ways in the application. When you want to say, I want to put this thing into a toolbar, there is a word called toolbar, but it's not strictly interpreted as a toolbar that sort of, it must be this thing that's across the top. It is featured commands that need to be exposed to the user in a way that is appropriate. And that's a subtle change, because when you capture the idea of what this user interface element is trying to describe, you can then have flexibility to say, okay, and how am I going to manifest that? So in the case of a quit menu on mobile, there isn't one. It won't be there. That capability is not something that exists. In the case of something like a toolbar, well, it could be a thing that is in the window itself. It could be something that's in a ribbon. It's something that could be, in some sort of expanded menu off of a toolbar, like it would be on mobile. So you have flexibility in how to represent it, as long as the language that you're using to describe that capability is not bound to a specific implementation. The only place where we do tie to a specific implementation is when it is a thing that is everywhere. A button is a button is a button everywhere. A button is something you press. A button is something that's responded to. So yeah, we can have a button everywhere. But when you get into the more esoteric areas, then you're starting to look for what is the use case we're describing. The biggest version of that we're seeing at the moment is in this big picture app navigation. That's kind of why it's taken so long to get to this, is that we've got a split container widget. But how do you do split containers on a phone? Because a phone doesn't do that. The way that phones do split containers is this sort of context pulling content in. And that's got much more to do with the idea of there is a list of things. And when you select one of those things, it brings in another panel of content. But that conceptual representation also maps what you see on desktop, where there's a split container. Think of any IDE that you've ever used. On the left-hand side, there is a selection of files, and on the right-hand side, there's the file that's currently being displayed. There's a list of things and the detail that's associated with those things. So if you capture the idea of there is a relationship between a list of things and the detail of those things, rather than specifically there is a sidebar and a panel of content on the right-hand side, it gives you a much more flexibility in terms of how you represent that to the end user. So that's kind of how it manifests in terms of API. But then the step back from that is that there's two additional features that are important to keep in mind. One is that whilst we do provide a cross-platform API, Toga is an API where you can say, give me a button or give me a detail view or whatever it is, however we end up, detail scaffold, however we end up representing that. Whilst that exists, we also provide the hooks to get into the lower levels. So if you are on Android and you do want to put up a very specific Android thing, you can get to that lower level and you can say, okay, now we're on Android, sys.platform equals Android, do this lower level thing. So the capability to get down to the lower level continues to exist. You just have to interact at that point, recognize that you're not doing something that is genuinely cross-platform. You are doing something to expose a specific capability of Android in this specific instance. Yes, it's going to be harder to do. Yes, it's going to be harder to represent, but the capability is there if you do need to get into it. The last one is that it is impossible to be all things to all people. If in particular, when you're using a cross-platform or defining a cross-platform API, it is impossible to build all possible applications on all possible platforms, and Toga isn't trying to. Toga's key market, sort of the people that we're trying to get to, the people who are going to find Toga useful, are the people who are 1-2-person engineering teams that need to have an iOS and Android app. This is kind of Toga's origin story. I was 15 years ago at this point, working on a startup. I had this great Django website, but I needed a mobile application. I was a 1-person engineering team, and I could not spend the time to build an entire Android application and an entire iOS application. I just need something. I don't need it to be perfect. I need it to exist. The existing is more important. And being able to make the simple things possible, to be able to make 80% of just put a button in someone's hand when they're out in the field, that is the use case that's important. We want that use case to be satisfied. If we can satisfy 80% of users to get an application out the door, there are still going to be 20% of applications that are either difficult or impossible to build with Toga. But those applications are also areas where it's Facebook, and Facebook has entire teams of iOS and Android engineers to spend on building an iOS native app, building an Android native app. And so those people can actually afford to go and be platform specific and then make things that are common, the things that actually need to be shared. And so Toga's not trying to solve all problems for all people. It's just trying to solve the 80% case to make it possible for someone to build an iOS and Android app from a single source code base. Longer term, we can extend that out. We can make it 85%. We can make it 90%. I think it is a fool's errand to think that we are ever going to have 100% of all possible apps being built through a cross-platform framework, because the abstraction just won't get there. I don't know if anybody else wants to weigh in on any of that, or anyone has any other thoughts they want to add in, or questions they want to add.
All right. Thanks so much, Russell. And that's down the BeeWare. And with that, it is time to wrap up. This has been...
Sorry, no, there's one more question. We had Russell Martin jumped in. There's an additional question on the got added live. So yeah, I'll throw it to you, Russell.
Yeah, apologies again. I didn't mean to throw that in and throw you off. I was just curious. You had talked about the iOS packaging through a CI build wheel, as well as for Android. I think it's a common thing that people hit unexpectedly when building Toga apps and with Briefcase, is that they've done development, they've gotten so far, and then they try to get something running on iOS or Android, and they find that unfortunately the package isn't there. So I'm kind of curious what existing barriers are still there. Is it just time, or more fundamental things to getting those third-party packages up on the repos for people to install through pip and UV and the normal processes?
At this point, it is, at least to my mind, it is almost entirely time and just resources. The infrastructure is there. I am not saying we have fixed all the problems. Part of the reason why I spent 12 months last year working on packaging is that if every time I turn around, there's another ecosystem with another build system with another set of weird quirks and whatnot. So I'm sure there are build systems that don't have iOS and Android support, but if you've got a setup tools, if you've got a Meson, if you've got a CMake build system, if you've got a Rust-based Maturin build system, you should be able to build your package for iOS and Android at this point. Asterisk, please let us know if you can't. So at the moment, I think the biggest issue is that people don't even know this is a thing they can ask for. They don't even know that this is a capability that that exists. I was at PyCon US a month ago, and I was having conversations with people who were basically saying, "Oh yeah, but we can't install Pillow on iOS yet." And I said, "Well, yeah, no, the wheel's been in PyPI for 12 months. Like, you absolutely can do this." getting the knowledge out there that it can be done at all, getting the knowledge out there about how you do it, I think is the biggest challenge we have at this point. The one thing I will flag here is that there is if you go to beeware.org/mobile-wheels, there is essentially the Python ecosystem standard leaderboard of wheels that exist, or packages that have published wheels for iOS and Android. That list is very sparse at the moment, and the reason it's sparse is because I only have 2 arms and there's a limit to how many things I can do at once. I have submitted some packages. If you are in the BeeWare ecosystem and you are interested and you have iOS, maybe pick one of those packages and work out whether or not they can be ported. Cryptography, CFFI, NumPy, I know are all, I've got packages for them. I'm just trying to waiting for pieces of the ecosystem to be available for me to submit packages upstream. All the pull requests are already in place and are being reviewed. But things like PyYAML, there is, as far as I can make out, no reason why PyYAML shouldn't exist on iOS. So someone just needs to submit the pull request upstream to make that wheel compile. If you are interested and you want to know how to do that, come join us in the BeeWare Discord, and I'm happy to point you in the direction of what you need to do. The short version is CI build wheel requires likely CI build wheel requires a configuration, or you need to work out how that package drives its build system to build its specific wheels and submit the GitHub Actions workflow, whatever it is they're doing to get those patches up. Very, very rarely is there anything that actually needs to be fixed in the code, unless the code is invoking subprocesses. In particular, the test process invoking subprocesses is usually where we get caught. But as long as you're avoiding those subprocess calls, the code will usually just build. If you've got third-party binary dependencies, so things like Pillow depends on libpng and libjpeg, you need to get those compiled for iOS and Android. That can be a little bit complicated, but a lot of the packages that are on this list are not iOS and Android, like they don't have downstream dependencies, or if they do, those downstream dependencies are known to compile on iOS and Android because they're being used in iOS and Android projects that aren't Python projects. So yeah, there's a bunch of pieces there. I think it really is just a matter of socialization and people stepping up to port those packages, because Malcolm and I can't port the entire Python ecosystem to iOS and Android.
All right, John asked a follow-up question. For abstractions, do we prefer to abstract the information that needs to be represented rather than the display patterns? For example, in the second screenshot, one can flag some destinations as important, and then on Android, use a floating action button even though the display is different. Charles weighed in, yeah, that's about the size of it. Whatever possible, we try to make an API for the information, or one might say the use case or the intent. The exact representation can vary between platforms. I don't know if anybody has anything to add to that.
I say, yeah, that's about right. Like we are trying to capture intent. We're not trying to capture specific manifestations. And then the specific like a given platform can choose how to represent that intent. I would need to have a look a little bit more closely at those specifics to be able to make examples. That's a good thing to take to a discussion around. If there's a capability that you wish to expose that a phone can do, we can have the discussion about what the API for that might look like, and what the this is how Android does it. What would the analog look like on iOS, or how should that look on iOS? What is the underlying idea that we're trying to capture there? The other thing I'll add to that is that Toga is absolute, it's version 0.5. It is a work in progress. We do not pretend that it is API complete. There is always going to be new things to add, and iOS and Android keep futzing with their platform, so there's always going to be new things to adapt to. So over time, we'll have to. We hope to add more capabilities as time goes by.
All right. I think we're good this time. That is Down the Bee Burrow, and with that, it is actually time to wrap up. This has been The Buzz Live. You can find us chatting all month long on the BeeWare Discord. Join at beeware.org/BEE/chat. I want to thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again next month.